Everyone doing today? Great. This is a great turnout, so thank you so much. There are a few seats in the front. Like I always say, it's not class, so you can come up in the front. No one will call on you. But thank you so much for a wonderful turnout as we welcome our very special guest, Professor John Slaughter. Is everyone recovering from the Super Bowl? Yeah? Wow, shades of 2006 there. I felt kind of bad for Pete. As you know, we have a really great lineup this semester for What Matters to Me and Why. John Slaughter, Catherine Quinlan, Alan Weiss. So please join us for the remainder of the events, and there's more information in the back. Before we get into it, I just want to shamelessly plug a few events. This evening, we're showing a film called Good People Go to Heaven, Good People Go to Hell, Save People Go to Heaven in School of Cinematic Arts, room 108 at 7 p.m. It's a film about end times and natural disasters. It's fairly provocative, and I invite you all to join us. On February 9th, we're doing our special Mindful USC event, our keynote event of the semester. It's called The Art of Stillness, a conversation with Pico Iyer, who's a very well-known author and TED speaker. He did a TED Talk on The Art of Stillness that has over 1 million views online, and he'll be there with his new TED book, The Art of Stillness. So we'll have a conversation with Pico, and then we'll do a book sale and reception. That's at the Doheny Memorial Library, DML 240, 7 p.m. on Monday, February 9th. On February 11th at 7:30 p.m., the Engelman Health Center is hosting a workshop called Yoga as Healing. And on February 17th at 7 p.m. at the Fishbowl at the University Religious Center, we're hosting Michael Jacobs, who's a very well-known Cherokee recording artist. We don't do a lot of Native American programming on our campus. We're really trying to do more, and so I invite you to see this really well-known, highly acclaimed Native American musician perform the Fishbowl. It's free and open to the public. That's February 17th at 7 p.m. Every year we host a spirituality and sexuality retreat. It's a collaboration between the Office of Religious Life, the LGBT Center, and the USC Hillel. This year it's happening on February 20th. It's really for students who are looking for a community to help them think about their spiritual identity, sexual orientation. We're going to have a really wonderful keynote speaker. It's a weekend away in the mountains. There's more information on the Office of Religious Life website, and so go check that out at orl.usc.edu. And finally, our alternative spring break trip this year, it's the 5th year we're doing this, is to Tucson, Arizona to look at and meet faith-based organizations who are doing work around border justice. It's going to be led by Associate Dean Reverend Jim Burklow. You can find out more information. It's during spring break at our website, orl.usc.edu. So as you all know, What Matters to Me and Why is a national program. It's at many research universities around the country, although it's been here the longest now, 14 years. And we do it every month, and what makes it so special is that students pick speakers, introduce speakers. So I'm really grateful today to introduce the student who will introduce our speaker. She's like a little sister to me. The first month I came to USC 7 years ago, she was in my office, and it's been a real joy for me to see her grow over that time. She started off as a master's student in Rossier, and now she's a 5th-year doctoral student. So I will miss her a lot when she leaves. She's done extraordinary work both at JEP, the Office of Religious Life, also at the Rossier School of Education. So please join me in welcoming Sable Manson.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. I'm sure many of you are like myself, that are very excited to hear Professor John Slaughter speak today. Being a graduate student of the Rossier School of Education and a member of the Publius Research Center, I knew that Professor John Brooks Slaughter joined Rossier in January of 2010 as a professor of education with the joint appointment at the Viterbi School of Engineering. However, it was in preparing to introduce him that I've learned so much more about this gracious scholar whom we are about to hear from. Professor Slaughter has had a remarkably distinguished career, which began as an electrical engineer and includes leading 2 universities, Washington State University and University of Maryland, and heading the National Science Foundation as its first African-American director. Before joining USC, he served as President of Occidental College for 11 years and transformed the school into one of the most diverse liberal arts colleges in the United States. He holds multiple honorary degrees from more than 25 institutions and has received numerous national and international awards and recognitions, including the Martin Luther King Jr. National Award. Yet I feel the best description of him comes from my friend and fellow colleague, Dr. Raquel Rawl. She describes Professor Slaughter as the type of person you are always striving to be on all fronts. His professionalism, his amiability, his intellect is unparalleled. He garners respect without even saying a word. He's warm, he's humble, and accomplished. His wife still makes him lunch every day, and he comes to work with a bright smile on his face. You can have real conversations with him and never know how remarkable of a life and a career he's had, because he's humble and generous with others. Although, obviously, we'll hear a bit about that today. He cares about people, about making a difference, and most importantly, close to my heart, he cares about education. So please join me in welcoming to the What Matters to Me Why stage, Professor John Slaughter.
Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much, and it's so nice to see so many friends. You know, it's a provocative title. What means most to me and why? And it's very easy for me to answer what means most to me and why. You know, it's like so many of you. The real answer to that question is your family. My family certainly means most to me. They have supported me through some of the crazy things that I have chosen to do, and without qualification. So I have to confess that really is the best answer to that question. However, it's harder for me to answer the question, what's next, that means most to me and why. And I've sort of cogitated on that and tried to figure it out. And the best thing I can do is share with you a story that perhaps puts it in perspective. It's a story about Charlie Brown, Linus, and Lucy, who went on a picnic. And they went up on a very, very high hill and they had a wonderful lunch. And after the lunch, they lay back and looked at the sky, which was particularly beautiful that day. And clouds were full and billowy, and it was just a marvel to look at. And Lucy said, you know, the clouds are absolutely beautiful. They look like great big balls of cotton, and they're so majestic. If you use your imagination, you can see things in them. What do you see, Linus? And Linus looked up and he said, you know, over there, looks like I can see the British Honduras in the Caribbean. And over there is Thomas Eakins, the painter and sculptor. And the stoning of St. Stephen. And it looks like Apostle St. Paul is over there. And Lucy said, that's fine, Linus, that's enough. Charlie Brown, what do you see? Charlie Brown furrowed his brow and scratched his head, and he said, I was going to say I saw a ducky and a horsey, but I changed my mind. Well, I've changed my mind several times on what I might say, and I've decided that the best thing I can share with you is the fact that I believe very, very strongly that there are some issues that we need to think about in higher education that are exceedingly urgent, and issues that we need to address here in a short time, because time is fleeting. I arrived at Occidental College in summer of 1988. Allegedly the first African American to head a private, highly selective liberal arts college in the country. I was not at all the first president to head a private institution. The first one was back in 1873. Gentleman Patrick Healy was the president of Georgetown University, a Jesuit priest, 1873. The interesting thing is that it was almost another 100 years before the next African-American headed a predominantly white private institution or any institution in the country, and that was Cliff Wharton, who became president of Michigan State in 1966. And so there was considerable amount of surprise when it was announced that I had been named president of Occidental. The interesting thing is that in the 80s and 90s, the word multiculturalism was a four-letter word. And if you talked about diversity and multiculturalism, it raised flags in the minds of a lot of people. I had a number of interesting challenges when I first came to the college. One of them had to do with the fact that there had been a great deal of consternation about the fact that on the side of the chapel on the campus were two huge crosses that made it appear that Occidental was a Christian school and not open to people of other faiths. So there had been a movement on the part of many faculty and students to have those crosses removed. It's a long story, and I won't go into that. That's another time. But it was interesting that even though I had been told that the crosses would be removed before I arrived as president, they were not. And so it was during my time that the crosses were removed, and I was accused of being the person who took God out of Occidental. The big challenge I had, again, had to do with the fact that I was seen as a person who was attempting to change the nature of the college by virtue of the fact that I believe very strongly that we needed to be more receptive to students of different races and ethnicities than had been the case in the past, when the school, for much of its history, had been a place which really received most of its students from places like Glendale, Pasadena, San Marino, and La Cañada, Plant Ridge. And the school was now in an environment where many, many more persons, particularly of Latino heritage, were living in and around the campus and were seeing it as a place where they wanted to attend. I argued very strongly that it was possible to have both equity and excellence at the same time and at their best, and that quality and equality were not mutually exclusive. This was received very well on the campus by students and faculty, but it was not received at all very well by many alumni of the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And so there was considerable clamor over the fact that I was reducing the quality of the institution by virtue of the fact that I was making it more accessible to persons who had historically not been there. My slogan really was that diversity is a hollow promise in the absence of equity, that diversity is meaningless unless excellence and equity exist, that diversity only has meaning at the intersection of excellence and equity. in order to answer the critics, a perfect example developed, and that example had to do with the fact that one year during the time I was there, we had 3 students who received coveted national awards: a Rhodes Scholar, a Marshall Scholar, and a Truman Scholar. The only liberal arts college in America at the time that had such a bounty of national awards. The Rhodes Scholar was a Romanian immigrant. The Marshall Scholar was an African-American woman from Harlem. The Truman Scholar was a Latina from Barrio in East Los Angeles. I never heard another argument about quality. I no longer believe in diversity as our goal. I think diversity has become a very overworked word for which we have limited understanding. Diversity is nothing but numbers. America has always been diverse. Prior to the European colonists arriving in this country, we had a diverse set of Indian tribes from ocean to ocean. We added to the diversity by, certainly when the colonists arrived, but we really began to add to the diversity when slaves from Africa were brought to Jamestown and to the east. But diversity is not something that in and of itself means that we have accomplished a great deal. A penitentiary is diverse, but nobody wants to be there because there's no excellence there and there's no equity there. The plantations were diverse, but again, there was no equity nor excellence there. So just simply saying that an institution is diverse is not meaningful. What really is meaningful is the presence of equity, equality of opportunity, equality of treatment, equality of regard, respect that is uniformly distributed across the institution. So we need to set our goals higher, I'm convinced. We can't simply say that we want to celebrate diversity. We need to celebrate the presence of both equity and excellence. I feel very, very strongly about that. In mathematics parlance, we would say that diversity is necessary, but not sufficient. We can't create an environment of equality of opportunity and equity in the absence of diversity, but the presence of diversity alone is insufficient. I am very concerned at this time about institutions in America that are so bent on a quest for prestige that they have ignored the importance of ensuring that more and more of our citizens have the fullest possible opportunity to receive a quality education. I read a report recently that said that young people who are from families in the top 1/4 of the economic strata in this country are 25 times more likely to have access to a quality college education than the 1/4 in the lowest economic strata, 25 times more likely. The fact that institutions measure their quality based on the fact that the students who go to my school or my school is better than your school because the students who go to students who go to your school could not get in my school. I didn't say that correctly, but when you look at ratings like U.S. News and World Report, when they value the things that they rate and look at the fact that they take great pride, institutions take great pride in being able to say that they have attracted the very best students, and they use that as a measure of institutional quality, you begin to see that our values are in the wrong place. That if we make it more difficult for persons who are socially marginalized and persons who are economically disadvantaged to receive the kind of quality education that's going to be needed, we are in fact hampering this country from being able to address the critical problems that it faces. I am convinced that the problems that America faces in energy independence, climate change, clean water and air, all of those problems, major problems, the problems that the National Academy of Engineering describes as the engineering challenges confronting America and the world, those problems cannot be solved unless we make certain that every person in this country has the fullest possible opportunity to acquire a very strong education. And if we continue to place barriers in front of anyone, we are doing a huge disservice not only to them, but ultimately to this country and the world. We need talent. We need educated talent. And that talent can be found among any group. It's not restricted only to a few. And for us as a set of higher educational institutions to ignore that fact concerns me a great deal. I have often thought about the fact that that mindset that existed back in the 1980s and 1990s, which said that by making it possible to increase access to our higher education institutions by those who have historically been disadvantaged in that regard, is decreasing the quality of the institutions. I had hoped that that had been eliminated, but it still exists, and it concerns me greatly. There are those who still believe in the halcyon days in which our higher education institutions were comprised of individuals who did not reflect the fullest possible numbers of persons from this country. They think of those as the good old days. My father used to say that those who talk about the good old days have a bad memory. I think that to a large extent that is still true. I wish that we could begin to think more broadly in terms of what it is that makes sense for us as higher educational institutions, and that no longer would we place a value on making it more difficult for those who have been marginalized in terms of their access to education to attend the best institutions in America. Talent and intelligence are distributed much more widely than we give them credit. And it is to those institutions who recognize that and who carry that out in the way in which they admit, educate, retain, and graduate young people that I think we owe congratulations, that we owe them the support that is so important in higher education today. I'm actually generally an optimistic person. And I feel very strongly that we are at a point where we can make that change. And I hope that with this current generation, as I told some young people last week, this current generation can correct some of the mistakes that we made, our generation, our older generation, in terms of being able to make education a right for all persons. Education truly is a civil right, and we need to think of it in those terms. So I'm going to stop preaching at this point and open it up to any questions that anyone may have. Please.
If you have questions,
Back there.
if you have questions, please raise your hand. I'll bring you a microphone so we can get your question on tape.
You bring up a good point about higher education in the U.S. that has been criticized about its accessibility, affordability, and to some extent accountability. So what do you think about Obama's new policy of offering free community education 2 years for high school students?
Well, I think that I support it, to answer your question directly. I think the president feels very strongly that just as we have made high school education free, a right for people, we should do that certainly at the community college level. I think he'd like to do it at the four-year level. I think, unfortunately, that it will be a tough sell with this Congress to institute that. But I'm pleased that he suggested that. I think putting it on the table is important to get people to begin to think about it. And my hope is that I'm wrong in terms of the congressional approval.
Dr. Schlatter, thank you for sharing with us your views and all your accomplishments thus far in progressing our education system. My question is, what, in your experience as a past president, are actionable items or actionable approaches that universities such as USC should take to progress our, from what I hear, declining numbers when it comes to diversity, especially underrepresented minorities here?
Joshua, as you know, my big concern, particularly in the sciences and engineering, is the relative absence of minority faculty and the need for increasing the diversity of the faculty pool. One of the things that we did at Occidental that I have suggested may be applicable here. Let me back up. When I was being interviewed for the position at Occidental, there was an African-American female on the search committee, a faculty member. And I asked her at one point how many African-Americans were on the faculty at Occidental. Occidental was much smaller, of course, than USC. The faculty was around 150 at the time. And I said, how many African-Americans on the faculty? And her answer was, you're looking at 50% of them. I had, fortunately, a very supportive faculty leadership when I came to the school, and they were committed to increasing the numbers of women and minorities on the faculty. And during the 11 years I was there, we added 65 new faculty members. Some of them were replacements for attrition and retirements and so forth. So the total faculty grew a bit. as a result. But of those 65, 1/2 were women, and 1/2 were people of color. And how did we do it? We did it by some simple mechanisms. We contacted the best universities in the country and asked them to send us the names of their budding PhD students, the ones who were, like you, a year or so away from graduating. And we wrote letters to many of them and invited them to come spend a year at Occidental, complete their research, write their dissertations while at Occidental, teach a course perhaps, or assist with the course, gave us an opportunity to get to know them, gave them an opportunity to get to know us. And from that initiative, we hired a significant number of outstanding minority and women faculty members from some of the best universities in the country. It was not an expensive activity. It was one that gave us access to some really wonderful people and to add to the campus. The benefit or the reason that those persons came and stayed was simply because they knew we meant what we said. We were serious. And I think one of the problems that many institutions have with attracting minority candidates is that those institutions do not convey a sense of seriousness about hiring them. And as you well know, that is easily detected by potential candidates if they don't feel that there is sincerity in the institution's commitment to increasing the diversity of the faculty. It scares them away. And I think that one of the reasons that there are so few underrepresented minority graduate students in the sciences and engineering in our colleges and universities is due to the fact that there are no underrepresented minority faculty, or too little. The numbers are, 1 and 2%, and 1 and 2% won't get it done.
Dr. Slaughter.
Yeah.
I wholeheartedly agree with your statement that every person should be allowed a strong education, that it's a right. But I get torn when it comes down to like the specifics in terms of higher education or vocational education, and like the tracking that happens in sometimes, and unfortunately how it's underrepresented minorities that end up in certain vocational programs versus others. And so I was just wondering if you could elaborate on what you meant by everyone should have access to a strong education, and maybe what that entails. Thank you.
Everyone should have the opportunity to. It may be that they don't wish to go to a four-year institution, but the opportunity should be there. And we need to get away from the practice that has existed far too long of prejudging whether or not that individual should be tracked, should be sent to vocational school. 100 years ago when I went to high school, I told anyone who could listen within earshot that I wanted to be an engineer. I remember saying that to the counselor when I first went to high school, and the counselor's answer was, you need to go to trade school, learn how to repair radios. well, I was too dumb to know what was happening to me. And so I ended up going to trade school, and I knew how to repair radios. And when I graduated from high school, I had good grades, but I hadn't taken the courses that I needed to take to go to engineering school. That was a huge disappointment. Now, I say that you know, that was a tragedy for me in those days. It's criminal today to do that to a young person, and it's still happening. And that's the reason I say that we need to focus on opportunity and not present barriers that make it more difficult.
Hey, John. How's it going?
This young man was one of my students at Occidental, so he remembers those days.
Yes, very, very fondly. My name is Billy Vela. I'm the director here of El Centro Chicano. That is our Latino Cultural Center here at USC. And I first want to say it's such an honor to have you here with us. You're a good friend, a good mentor of mine, and I'm so glad that there's all these folks that get to know you in that way. To speak quickly on that, you know, you're the reason why I went and was able to attend Occidental College. You're the reason why I was able to stay there, to be retained, and to be successful. There are so many more people like myself, colleagues and friends that I talk to all the time. So it's just amazing to have you here on stage talking about not just diversity, but the next step. So my question is, here at USC, I've been working here now for 9 years, and international students have risen a lot. I think it's pretty safe to say that we have a very strong international group of numbers now, and it was intentional. There was a plan. It didn't just happen. So to your point about folks like myself, I grew up in Highland Park. Highland Park is where Occidental College is at, as well as Eagle Rock. The increase that you and your group were able to lead at Occidental College. In the 9 years that I've been here, the Latino percentage has risen 3 percentage points, 11 to 14. UC Santa Barbara just became a Hispanic certified institution. That means they reached the 25% threshold. So I'd really love to hear, like the gentleman had asked earlier, what did you do? What were the things that Occidental did that not just USC, but other colleges can learn from in order to be able to attain that type of access and equity that you were speaking about?
Billy, I'm not sufficiently familiar enough with the composition of the student body at USC, so I can't comment on that so much, but I can say that again, what we did at Occidental, I think, was, first of all, build an admissions staff of people who truly cared. And that we reached out first to the community surrounding Occidental, like you see, Highland Park, Eagle Rock, and so forth, which is has increased significantly in terms of its Latino population. So students at Eagle Rock High School, for example, are at Franklin or those institutions that historically had avoided Occidental because they did not sense it as being a receptive place, were people that we targeted, that we invited to come to the campus. And I remember bringing a group of kindergarten students from one of the schools in the neighborhood, get them early to let them know that we were a place that was inviting to them. So I think it's a matter of the image you project to the population that you're attempting to attract to the institution. And fortunately, we were in the right geographical location to do that, and it was in our best interest to have our community behind us. And that turned out to be, I think, a win-win situation.
Dr. Slaughter, thank you so much for being here today. When it comes to minority recruiting here at USC, one of the first things I noticed when I came to this campus was the athletic program being such a huge part of the university's image. When it comes to attracting, and then I started talking to some minority students, and when I would ask them about the presence of minorities on campus, they would talk about the minority community, and then they'd say, oh, and then the athletic program, as if it was two different minority communities. And I just wondered, in terms of attracting more minority students to USC, what's the relationship with the athletic program in your mind? Do you think is it helpful? Does it make it daunting? How does athletics work with this larger problem that you've highlighted today?
Very good question. Equality athletics program, I think, is beneficial to an institution in many ways, and it certainly can benefit enrollment of all students. I'm sometimes concerned, though, at many big institutions, and this happened at some of the UC campuses right after, was it Prop 209, that a significant proportion of the freshman class the year after that proposition came in was comprised of football players and basketball players, minority football players and basketball players. When it gets to that point, then that's a huge problem. If minorities who could attend the institution are hampered by something like Prop 209, but a door is opened if, in fact, you can do a 4.37 40-yard dash or dunk a basketball. So I think we have to realize that our admission practices have to be carefully managed so that we are not using athletics as a way to make our numbers look inflated. I'm really concerned about, in the broader sense, I'm really concerned about the fact that many institutions, and this has happened at Michigan, it happened at University of Washington, and certainly happened at the UC campuses, the numbers plummeted after Prop 209, and the only places where the numbers stayed strong or increased were with the athletic programs, and that's not a good sign.
John, I have a question for you.
Yes.
So I know in many cases individuals are looking out to organizations for answering questions and problems, but I think an area that we overlook is sometimes what we can do ourselves. So I think it's okay to say what can an institution do, but I think we also have to ask ourselves what can we do. And in many cases I think we're overwhelmed, that we have to be the Martin Luther King, or we have to be somebody great. When really, if we address inequities that we see in our daily lives, that in and of itself will make a difference.
You're absolutely right, Linda. Thank you for that. That is so true. We need to realize that so much of the difficulties we face are due to the fact that there are structural inequities that we could fix. if we stop to realize that some of our actions are actions that are making it more difficult to accomplish these goals of equity and excellence. And sometimes unintentional, but nevertheless they have that negative impact. And if we just simply look to the top to fix it, it may not ever happen. So it has to be done by those of us at the grassroots level. So I concur wholeheartedly.
I think that's a great place to end it. Thank
Yeah,
you. Everyone, please join me in thanking Professor Slaughter, a gift of our appreciation. And we certainly hope that you all will join us next month, first Wednesday of every month, for another What Matters to Me and Why. Thank you all for coming.